Dear friends, welcome to the third episode of the study of the Buddhist psychology in relation to the prevention and treatment of alcohol and other drugs. We are actually reading the book A Mind Liberated from Alcohol and Drugs, and now we are studying the second chapter. We started with the second chapter, and this is the third episode on the second chapter. So, last two episodes, if you didn't have time to watch the first two episodes of this, I invite you all to watch it, go through it, because we are studying some new area, the Buddhist psychology of prevention and treatment of alcohol and other substance use. So, probably, maybe that you have experience in prevention and treatment of alcohol and drugs, and probably you have experience in studying Buddhist psychology, but this link is a little bit comprehensive. So that is why the first two chapters, studying the first two, listening to the first two episodes is also a very important thing. Anyway, let us look at where we stopped last time. Let me share this book with you first of all. Okay, here it comes. Right. You can see this. Last time we discussed about how the Vipallasa, and we tried to apply these theories to the ICD-10 and ICD-11 when diagnosing the alcohol use disorder, and how the craving is operated there. So, etiology of substance use, the etiology of alcohol and other drug use, the reasons, why do people use alcohol and drugs? Now, we discussed last two episodes, the craving, the attachment, the urge, the prema, adana, bandhana, that is mean the bondage, okay, grasping. So those are the reasons for someone to use substances. It is not simply the availability. And there is the demand, but the demand is created. It is created by external agencies. At the same time, when a child is in his nurturing process, quite a lot of ideas coming from the external, maybe the parents and alcohol industry strategies, their propaganda, tobacco industry propaganda, then the drug mafia also develop certain social milieu that recognizes that substance use is beneficial. So likewise, that in his mind, demand is created. A demand is created. So how to erase, how to unlearn what they have learned? So that is the main area of the prevention and treatment, as we discussed in previous settings as well. But now we are going to see today the alcohol and drug, how alcohol and drug become attractive through proliferation. That is prapancha. The prapancha is a very important concept in Buddhist psychology. Prapancha. Sometimes now it has come to the English terminology also as prapanchaization. Not very well, not very much used, but the proliferation. So let us examine what it is. But before that, today we have to see how certain substances react on our mind, brain as well. So we know there are many ways of categorizing the substances, but what is accepted mostly, there are 5 categories like stimulants, opiates, depressants, hallucinogens, and the other substances. So stimulants are like amphetamine, methamphetamine, nicotine, cocaine. They have been classified under the stimulants. Then the opiates, examples are heroin, methadone. Those are the main opiates. Then the depressants are including the benzodiazepine and the alcohol. So remember, according to the categorization, the alcohol is nothing but a depressant. So it is categorized under depressant. Then there are hallucinogens like LSD, the magic mushroom, and there are certain substances that do not strictly fit into the flow for classification scheme. So they are come under the category 5, and like for example the cannabis, marijuana, and some inhalants. So likewise that we can categorize these substances into 5 categories. Now main focus today that I have to emphasize, both the opiates like heroin or even the cannabis, even the alcohol, they are not stimulants but depressant, which depresses the nervous system. But the funny part of it is that after using these substances like alcohol or heroin and cannabis, sometimes people behave just as that they have taken stimulants, right? So the real experience of using alcohol, heroin, or cannabis is very drowsy, unpleasant, right? Very sleepy. Likewise, not energizing yourself anyhow. But people perceive after using heroin, after using alcohol, that they have taken a stimulant and they get energized like. So that we have to be very careful. That is not the pharmacological effect of those substances, but this is nothing but the mind made. So under perversions, we discuss how people wrongly perceive, wrongly sense, and there are perceptions, wrong thinking, as well as uh, the way that we look at it, the drushti, the way of looking at it, the vision, wrong vision. So because of these things, the people ultimately identify the unpleasant heroin or alcohol as pleasant, unbeneficial alcohol or heroin as beneficial, right? So let us look at how actually alcohol reacts on the brain. Sometimes there may be some people who are with the scientific background who are eager to learn Buddhist psychology and prevention listening to this. So they may be familiar with this. The use of alcohol and many other drugs such as heroin and cannabis is unpleasant, painful, and unbeneficial, and leads to many health and social problems that we have studied. We have looked into that with a kind of bare understanding and with a clear comprehension that we got that all these are not pleasant. But in future episodes also, we are going to scrutinize this in detail, look into this in detail. For example, alcohol is a depressant. We know what is alcohol, the ethanol. It is a depressant that reduces the level of activity of the central nervous system, CNS. The neurotransmitters, the effect is on the brain, is on these neurotransmitters. Later on, at the right time, we will discuss about the neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitter receptors are generally insensitive to ethanol. Normally, it is insensitive, but there are, however, ethanol has been reported as a specific and powerful substance that affect the function of at least 2 particular type of neuroreceptors. So neuroreceptors, there are neuroreceptors. So ethanol is sensitive to 2 types of, that is GABA-aminobutyric acid. So we call it GABA receptors, and glutamate receptors. GABA receptors and the glutamate receptors. Now let us look at the action of this. GABA and glutamate are chemical neurotransmitters that account for much of the inhibitory and excitatory activity in the brain. So stimulants normally they excite the brain. The depressant, the inhibitory action on the brain. When the terminals of one cell release GABA into the receptor on the next cell, the cell become less active, and when glutamate land on a glutamate receptor, the cell become more active. In this way, many circuits in the brain maintain the delicate balance in between the excitation and inhibition. Excitation and inhibition. So the role of the GABA receptors and the role of the this other receptors, right? Now let us see how it works. Glutamate receptors. Alcohol, remember that alcohol increases the activity of the neurotransmitter GABA. Okay, the researchers showed the alcohol increases the activity of the neurotransmitter GABA. Since GABA inhibits neuron activity, enhancing GABA functions reduces the excitability in many neural circuits. So that is why the alcohol works as a depressant in our brain. As alcohol increases the inhibitory activity of GABA receptors and decrease the excitatory activities of the glutamate receptors, individual would typically experience drowsiness and lethargy immediately after using alcohol. Users would experience drowsiness and many other sedating effects. So this is science, this is the evidence on these things. So alcohol increases the activity of the neurotransmitter GABA, as well as it reduces the excitability of the many neural circuits. Then as alcohol increases the inhibitory activity of the GABA receptors and decrease the excitatory activity of the glutamate receptors. So that is why alcohol, scientifically, if you look at how it works, so it has the effect as a depressant on our brain. Now we have to look into, if we analyze the opiates also, it is also the same, right? So that means after taking heroin also, it acts as a depressant, definitely not as an stimulant, right? When what we have to see, the alcohol is a depressant, then the cannabis and this popular known marijuana, and then the heroin, most of them are depressants, work as a depressant. But the, as I mentioned earlier, that the funny part is after using alcohol, people behave differently. They don't behave just as they take a depressant. Something really leads to a sedation. No, they act as they taken something, stimulate themselves. Okay, so that is the part that we have to learn, and that is what we are learning at the moment. We are discussing at the moment. How does this happen? Even the Buddhist psychology shows a path, the way how it happens. How it happens. Let me now once again little bit explain the physiology part of it. When imbibed ethanol, C2H5OH, that is alcohol, ethanol is metabolized predominantly in the liver. You know, it affects the ethanol is absorbed by the liver because the liver is very kind. So they absorb the poisonous ethanol. They don't know that intentionally that person has taken alcohol. So he thinks that is something happened mistakenly. So they absorb it. And then enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase or ADH breaks ethanol down into acetaldehyde. So it breaks down in the liver. This in turn is break down to another enzyme called acetaldehyde dehydrogenase enzyme to form acetate, which is metabolized to carbon dioxide and water. The intermediate product, acetaldehyde, is a toxic chemical that induces a flushing response, characterized by facial flushing, nausea, and vomiting. So when someone uses alcohol, that is why they feel the flushing, nausea, the vomitish feeling. This reaction occur as a consequence of high blood acetaldehyde concentration. So anyway, so the liver tries to metabolize the alcohol, and but the blood alcohol level actually leads to someone for a depressive state, as well as that leads to uncomfortable feeling that he's really sensing. So the chemical effects of heroin is also the same. To a person who uses heroin without the related social conditioning and the influence of the common misconceptions or positive outcome expectancies associated with it, the experience of its effect would be decidedly unpleasant. So, on using a heroin, for the first few times or even after, the user would typically feel a decline in energy and liveliness and may experience severe cough, vomiting, nausea, headache, or heavy-headedness, itchiness, and other forms of physical discomfort, right? These resulting symptoms are, without any doubt, reported to be unpleasant. When we have this, now think about a day that you have these symptoms, the day that you have the cough, vomiting, the head is very painful, headache, then you have the vomitish feeling, the nausea, right, heavy-headedness. So you label that day that you are sick, you are not healthy. So after using heroin, after using alcohol, people really get that feeling, but they can't report. So they feel it, they report something completely different. Okay. So we are going to see how it happens there. For that, we have to look into the Buddhist cognitive psychology, which explains the cognitive process of thinking process according to the Buddhist psychology. Now, because a very basic idea that I am going to introduce is that we have developed concepts about alcohol, heroin, and other drugs. The moment that we hear the word whiskey, beer, for some people, it evokes very pleasurable feeling just hearing that word. They haven't seen alcohol yet, but when they heard the word also, they become happy and elated. That is why I said that in a previous episode, people become happy and elated at the mere sight of the unopened bottles. How does that happen? Because they have developed a concept on alcohol and tobacco that hasn't happened within a day, but from childhood they have developed this. So to understand that, so we have to, how the Buddhist psychology explain this. There is a cognitive process such that we have to understand. This may be a little difficult. Even many of us who study the Buddhist psychology find that this understanding of the sutra, Madhupindika Sutra, is a little bit difficult. So maybe that you may have some difficulty in understanding, but just hearing for the first time, and once you will get some idea about it, and later on, once you study this sutra and study the Buddhist psychology, you will get a better understanding, better awareness about this cognitive process. Anyway, now we discuss in earlier, although alcohol, heroin, and cannabis are depressant, as discussed earlier, consumers of alcohol or drugs, as well as majority of the general public, even people who are not using alcohol and other drugs, also think that this is pleasurable. Okay. Actually, they are the people who cannot be convinced on this. Anyone who is using alcohol, anyone using heroin, at a point they just admit this is unpleasant, right? But the people who have developed the concept that not using this substance, they don't have the practical experience of that. So they think, no, 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 no. Why people are using this? Because maybe it is pleasurable. So to take it away from them is difficult. Actually, for a drug user, it is easy because they have experienced the pain and suffering of the substance use. Okay. Then develop the distorted perception. The people, the drug users have developed the distorted perception, sanya vipallasa, we discussed it in earlier, the distorted thoughts, chitta vipallasa, and distorted view, ditti vipallasa, on alcohol or drugs, resulting creating a positive image or concept around substances. So that concept, that is called the prapancha. Right? In Sanskrit, it is prapancha, and in Pali, we call it papancha. But remember, just as any other things, that we cannot translate this word to English or any other language, because the Pali word papancha gives a very specific kind of a meaning. But we can see how various writers use to translate this word papancha to get a better idea. We will discuss it later. Now there is a very beautiful section in the Madhupindika Sutra. Individuals who are not familiar with Pali may have a difficulty in understanding this, but please pardon me, because you have to just hear these things, but later on we will discuss how a concept is developed. When we see the light object, the object is there, okay, and it comes to our eyes, then the sensation process, then we perceive it. Once we perceive, the signal comes to the mind process, the thinking process, the brain process, of course, brain process, and then the thinking process ultimately develop concepts. So many years back, 2500 years ago, Lord Buddha summarized how these concepts are developed. This is the cognitive psychology of Buddhism. In Buddhist psychology, the cognitive part of the Buddhist psychology. Of course, the cognitive process is presented in many ways in Buddhist psychology. One is this Madhupindika Sutra, Honey Bowl Sutra, Madhupindika Sutra. Then there is this Chitta Viti, okay? Chitta Viti, right? That is another concept. At later stages, we are going to study that also. Now, let us see how the Buddha explained this. Actually, this sutra is not directly said by Buddha, but by Mahakachayana, but later on confirmed by the Buddha. So the sutra says, Chakkuncha auso, Paticca Rupecha Uppachati Chakku Viññānam, Tinnan Sangati Passo, Passapaccha Vedana, Yang Vedeti Tang Sanjanati, Yang Sanjanati Tang Vitakketi, Yang Vitakketi Tam Papancheti, Yang Papancheti Tato Nidanang, Purisang, Papancha Sanya Sanka Samudha Charanti, Atita Nagata Pachuppannesu, Chakku Viññesu, Rupesu. So that is the process. So I know the people who are not familiar, they cannot understand this. But let me go one by one and understand, because when you learn Buddhist psychology, right, that you have to see the cognitive process how the Buddha explained. Depend on the I and form. Form is the object. Depend on the I and the object, the I conscious arises. That is the very basic way the I conscious arises. That is how the sensation starts. The I conscious arises. The meeting of the three is contact, or we call it passa or contact. So what are the three? The I, then the form, and the I conscious. To get the message inside our mind, these three things should be there. What? The I, then the object, and the I conscious. Meeting all that three is called the contact. That is called passa, contact. Passa, contact. Then what happened? With contacts at requisite condition, there is feeling. When there is contact, passa, the feeling comes. Feeling, Vedana. So please learn the word Vedana. Then comes the feeling, Vedana. So the passa, that is the very basic one. Then we start to sense it. We sense to the external world. We are going to sense the external world. So an internal world also. Later on we will see. What one feels, one perceives. Then comes the perception part. When they feel, what one feels, one perceives. Sanjanati, labels in the mind. So Sanjanati means you try to identify, recognize, cognizing and recognizing. So this is recognizing. Oh, this is that. This is alcohol bottle. Oh, this is my friend. So you are recognizing that. So how you identify a friend? First of all, the friend must be there, right? Friend must be there. That is the object. Okay, the form. Then your I should be there. Other than the friend and the I, the consciousness part comes there, the I consciousness. When those three have there, only the I can sense that that is only the message. Some message comes, some data is input to our system, central nervous system, let us say. And then what happened? That the passer, that process, the joining of those three called the passer, then the contact, then contact, with that contact, the feeling comes. You start feeling something, but still you haven't identified it. Then you identify it. That is called the perception. You identify it as pleasurable or sometimes unpleasurable or neutral, that we are going to discuss later on. So the identification comes, the sanya, that is called the sanya. Label, what one perceive, one conceives or think about. Then what happened? With that, we are starting thinking. So we recognize, oh, he is my friend. Here you recognize your friend. Then with that, the thoughts are coming, that is called vitakketi. Vitakketi means vitakka. That means the thinking process starts. Thinking, you start thinking. What one thinks about, one objectifies or proliferation, prapancheti. So when it is for the attachment side, the akusala side only, that you prapancheti, because then you bring your memory lane, you bring your memory and try to give interpretation to what you see, because then you create a concept on your friend, and the learned things are also coming there. That is called the prapancha sanya sanka. Prapancha sanya sanka. So we will discuss it later. So that is the forward and backward. It can happen. Then the objectification, proliferation happens based on what a person objectifies or proliferate, the perception and categorize of objectification or proliferation, assail them. That is called the prapancha sanya sanka, about past, present and future, from cognizable via the I. So from the I, we try to cognize that part. So that is the cognition process. So let us see this little bit. Dependent on the intellect of the idea, intellect conscious arise. The meeting of the three is contact. Based on what a person objectifies, a perception and categorize of objectification, assail them about past, present and future ideas, cognizable via the intellect. So that is the thing. So then we have 6 senses according to Buddhist psychology. Please, now we are going to take this one by one and understand. There are 6 senses. One is I consciousness, I chakku viññāna, and then the nose consciousness, the ghana viññāna, you get messages from your nose. Then the tongue consciousness, you get ideas from the tongue, the taste, that is called jivha viññāna. Ear consciousness, sota viññāna, the skin and the body, the feeling, that is called the kaya viññāna, what you sense from your body, skin, that is called kaya viññāna. And other than that, the Buddhism has this mind consciousness called mano viññāna, because the things are coming. Sometimes the thoughts are coming from your inside mind, called mano dhatu, right? Mano viññāna. When a sense faculty, it's receptive, when a sense faculty, you know that sense faculty, there are, according to Buddhist psychology, there are 6, eye, nose, tongue, skin, ear, then the mind. So there are sense faculty, its respective sense object and consciousness, attention comes together, there is contact, passa. That is, now I'm little bit try to symbolize this. right? When a sense faculty, eye or ear or nose, its respective sense object, sense faculty, sense object, that is light, sound, right, smell, and consciousness. Then the third part is the consciousness. Attention comes together. There is contact passa, a sense experience. So that is called the sense experience, the passa. This in turn generates feeling, vedana. It generates the feeling vedana. How we see pleasure in something perceived as being attractive, pain in what is repulsive, and boredom in the natural. So all that is the perception part. This perception sanya in turn generates thinking vitakka. And when we think in this way, we mentally proliferate or papancheti. The papancha comes there. So the concepts are arising out of these things. Now, this diagram will summarize that. We know the physiological basis, the ear, eye, ear, nose, tongue, skin, and here they take the mind. Mind can be the brain. Okay. Environment, then the form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and idea. So from the brain, it generates ideas, right? The mind, ideas. Then there is this consciousness, attention, the very basic activation of the consciousness. The vinyana can be either chakku vinyana, sota vinyana, ghana vinyana, jihva vinyana, kaya vinyana, mano vinyana. We discussed that. So according to the eye, when it ear, sota vinyana. When it is nose, ghana vinyana. Tongue, jihva vinyana. Skin, kaya vinyana. Mind, mano vinyana. So combining these three, eye, form, and the eye consciousness, that is chakku vinyana, happens automatically, the passa, the contact. So that is called the contact, passa. Then the passa, with the passa, it generates the feeling, the vedana, the sensation. Let us say you sense it, feeling. Then the feeling leads to the perception, sanya, you recognize it now. Earlier it was just an object, but now recognize it. Once you recognize, it leads to the thought process called vitakka, the thought process. And then what happened? With that vitakka, it comes to the proliferation stage, the prapancha. Then you develop prapancha. With this prapancha, proliferation, they develop finally the prapancha, sanya, sankha. Now there are three prapancha based on sanya and sankha. So later on we are discussing that. So with that we have our behaviors. We develop our behaviors. If it is an enemy, we go and fight. For some people, if it is alcohol, they drink it. If it is heroin, the drug user use it. But who have not developed this prapancha, they won't go and use it. They don't, because they don't have the positive concept around. They have not developed a positive concept around alcohol or any other substances. Anyway, so through this, we are going to get the alcohol and heroin example and see how this process is taking place, how the proliferation is taking place. We are going to get some examples, and so finally it affects the behavior. So alcohol user sees alcohol bottle, glass, bar or drinking setting, and many other features associated with alcohol use. Let us take the alcohol use. Meeting the object I and the I consciousness together is contact passa. Then what happens? Passa. Contact passa is the contact between the external sense object, the internal sense organ, and the consciousness vijnana. Three things together called passa. When an object presents itself to the consciousness through one of the six senses, right, this mental factor arises, contact the passa. It is the mental factor at the point of inception of the thought. So the thinking process start with this passa. By this consciousness, one mentally touches the object. That is how we mentally touches the external object. Your friend is there, psychologically, mentally you touches him. It happens at the time of this passa, touches the object and has appeared thereby initiating the entire cognitive event, such as experiences by feeling, perceives by perception, feeling, vedana, and perceives by perception, sanya, and wills by volition, enabling one to recognize an object that the mind has once perceived through the senses. This cognitive process is explained in the Madhupindika Sutra as illustrated in the diagram above. Let us look at the diagram once again. So, I form and the I consciousness together, they have to meet together, right? If any one of the three is disabled, the thinking process won't happen, because if the I is in default, if the I consciousness is in default, in the darkness you may not see the object, then you can't see that, right? Likewise, all three should be in the right form, and then you get passa, then vedana, sanya, then you start thinking vitakka. So that's the thinking process, and then you develop a prapancha, a concept on that. And based on that concept, right, prapancha, sanya, sanka, you give interpretation at the latter stages. You know, the other signals all based on the prapancha, sanya, sanka. So that leads to the behavior of using alcohol or not using alcohol, using heroin or not using heroin. So that is the cognitive process. We simply exploit into countless conceptions, sankhara, and perceptions, sanya, about the past, the future, and the present sense experiences. Our mental proliferation is processing us. Ultimately, the mental proliferation, the prapancha take us, okay? We become a slave of this prapancha. So when a drug user become a slave of this concept of that heroin is wonderful, heroin is marvelous, then what happened? That he creates a existence as a drug user, that is called bhava. Bhava. He created bhava. Okay, bhava, right? So that is how it happens. Okay, I know this is not very easy to understand, but once you go through this 2-3 times, and when we discuss the practical examples of this, you will understand it better. But now we are discussing the cognitive process. To my mind, the most difficult area to understand the Madhupindika Sutra and the process of forming prapancha. When there is contact passa, once again, let us look into that. When there is contact passa, there is feeling vedana. That is what the sutra says. Vedana is the mental factor that feels and enjoys the taste of the sense object when it comes in contact, passa, with the senses. So vedana, you feel it. It is an affective mode in which the object is experienced as pleasurable, painful, or neutral. So vedana can be 3 ways, and sometimes we do it classify it in 5 ways also. So the either pleasurable or painful or neutral senses. It is the affective mode in which the object is experienced as pleasurable, painful, or neutral. According to Madhupindika Sutta, what one feels, one perceives. Sanjanati. Perception, sanya, take notice of the sense object as to color, form, shape, name. So recognizing, enabling one to cognize and recognize an object that the mind has one perceived through the senses. It is a mere perception, but interprets and identification objects with memory support. So with the memory support, with the Prapanchasanya Sanka, I would say it in that manner. So it identifies further. At this stage, people recognize due to the past experience that what is in the bottle is whiskey. So they come, once they see a bottle of whiskey, ultimately they decide, oh, this is a bottle of whiskey. The Adimokka is there. Decide firmly, this is a bottle of, that is how they identify a bottle of whiskey. Still, up to Vedana, the process occurs on a very impersonal note based on the general formula of causality, Paticca Samuppada. That is also a theory that we have to discuss laterly. So then comes the stage of the thinking vitakka, where the process taken a personal approach. When we start thinking only, the personal approach comes. Then your memory. So when someone look at, say, people see heroin or alcohol, whiskey bottle, wine bottle, various things, but they have different thinking processes based on their papancha sanya sanka. Okay, they are what is in their memory, how they conceptualized it. Okay, that is why that a person actually thinks when they see a alcohol bottle, oh, very attractive. For another one, yeah, it is unpleasant even at the optimum level. So that depends on the person's attitude. So that personal part comes at the vitakka level. Then comes the stage of thinking vitakka, where the process taken a personal approach, which is deliberate activity. Then it comes to a deliberate thing, intentional thing. Initial application vitakka applies and introduce the mind and its mental factors to the sense object. Now the thinking process is coming with vitakka with the rest of the mental competence or the mental factors it tries to identify. In general terms, vitakka means the sense of notion, ideas, thoughts, or reasoning. Vitakka is also called sankappa, intention or thoughts, and as such is distinguished as miccha sankappa or wrong intention when it is engaged in the unwholesome consciousness, and Samma Sankappa or right intention in wholesome consciousness. So the Vitakka can be in the right way, the skillful way, or unskillful way. When someone uses alcohol or heroin or cannabis, or we have to see that the Vitakka goes through the unskillful line. Okay, with the association of Lobha, Ditti, Mana, and various other, mainly Lobha, Ditti, Mana, and various other defilements. Right. Then what happened? Vitakka is also called Sankappa. So Sankappa, it is concept. It can be a Micha Sankappa or Samma Sankappa. So good concept or bad concept. Micha Sankappa is a bad concept. And the right concept, right idea, that is called Samma Sankappa. When it is developed and cultivated, vitakka becomes the lead factor in the first fine material rupavachara jhana. So sometimes that people can develop concentration and the vitakka become very powerful at the first level, which inhibits srota and topa. When we start the inhibition, when we start vitakka, when the vitakka become prominent, the srota and topa, the tina midda inhibits. It inhibits. Typically, this thinking process is accompanied by two other critical mental factors called factors, chetasikas, that is called sustained application, vichara, and decision, adimokka. So the vitakka always goes with the vichara and adimokka in day-to-day affairs, right? Vichara sustain the mind and its mental factors on the sense object by letting them repeatedly examine the object. It manifests as anchoring those phenomena in the object to understand the object. Vichara is also a jhana factor that inhibits vichikicha. doubt or indecision. So adimukha makes decisions or unshakable resolution about the sense object, like a judge who decides a case. It settles with conviction and awareness by which one stay with what the mind has logically established as just this is. So this is alcohol bottle. So you see, now we discuss how people perceive and understand with the concept, how this attractive image is made within the system. So the practical experience we are discussing later. Now we are looking at the theoretical part of it. So when one sees a alcohol bottle, it comes to your eye, then it starts the mental process, starting with Vedana, then Sanya, the recognition part. With that Sanya, the thinking part comes, that is called Vitakka stage. Of course, what we discussed just now is, with Vitakka, there are several other mental concomitants or the mental factors, mainly the Vichara and Adimokka. Vitakka Vichara together is the thinking process, and Adimokka is deciding on what you see, right? You recognize and firmly understand, oh, this is what is on that table is a whiskey bottle brought for us to drink or something like that in a party. People might think about it, right? Now they have different concepts on this. Now they have different concepts on this, right? That is a personal, that comes with the personal note. Okay. So that is what we have discussed, how this thinking process occurs according to the Madhupindika Sutra. According to the Madhupindika discourse, what one thinks about, one objectifies or proliferate. So what Vitakka turns to a prapancha, proliferates. Proliferation is a complex concept in Buddhist psychology that explains the cognitive process developing in a negative or unwholesome direction. So there are many other sutras supporting this prapancha, explaining this prapancha. One is that Prapanchakya Sutra. Prapanchakya Sutra by Dhammapala says passion is proliferation. So passion. Aversion is proliferation. Confusion is proliferation. Prapancha. Craving is proliferation. The view is a proliferation. And conceit is a proliferation. So the proliferation, objectification, or prapancha is the end product of cognitive process where someone develops a wrong concept about an object. This is the lousy learning of the individual, learned through conditioning, social learning, cognitive learning. So through this learning, they develop a concept, prapancha. For example, ideas or myths such as alcohol is pleasurable, drugs help to forget problems, and alcohol helps to ease tiredness are some examples of proliferation, wrong learning, or wrong objectification around alcohol and drugs. We are spending little bit time actually on this Madhupindika Sutra. Why is that when you want to look at the alcohol and drug issue through the Buddhist psychological perspective, these words are also very important to understand. So we learn certain words like what the prapancha. So prapancha, concept. What is prapancha? The translation, conceptual proliferation. That is one translation, conceptual proliferation. There is a very good book written by Venerable Jnanananda. The book name is The Concept and Reality. So if you want to get a good idea about this Madhupindika Sutra, I suggest you to read that book. It is available in free of charge. You can download it. So concept and reality. How Venerable Katukurunde Bhikkhu translated prapancha is conceptual proliferation. Then I think Venerable Analayo translated it as diversification. And sometimes it is called as mental proliferation. Pia Tang who actually collect all the sutras and try to define those sutras, Piatang, he gives the word mental proliferation. So for the word of prapancha. Then the prapancha sanya sanka, there are three words here: prapancha, sanya, sanka. So the Jnanananda Bhikkhu, he says the concept characterized by the mind's prolified tendency. So that is the end result of the prapancha, then turn to the prapancha sanya sanka. And that is there is a backward process also. Bhikkhu Bodhi says perception and notions tinged by mental proliferation. And the Piatan says proliferation of conception and perception. Proliferation of conception and perception. So that is prapancha sanya sanka. So ultimately, that is the memory that you have, a concept that you have, prapancha sanya sanka on anything. But today we are discussing about how we develop prapancha sanya sanka or the prapancha, right? The prapancha developed based on developed based on sanya and sanka. So that is called, that is why the Bodhi used the word notions. Notion. Proliferation of conception and perception. Piatang defined that. Prapancha sanya sanka. That is the overall concept that you have about anything, substances. Why this is important? Now we proliferate. We prapanchize. We make a prapancha based on the sanya and sanka. So we develop a concept on that thing. So that is the thing. So drug user has this concept developed. Okay. So this Buddhist psychology will help us how that proliferation is taking place step by step. So when they see the alcohol bottle or heroin or cannabis or any other drug, so they give a different interpretation to this than a normal person. The SUD person, AUD person has a different interpretation on those substances than a sober person. So that conception has to be changed. How to change that? That is called Nippapancha. Nippapancha. So Nippapancha thinking is very important. At a certain sutra, the Buddha says, the eighth Mahapurusha Vitakka. Mahapurusha Vitakka means the great thoughts a person can have. I can remember, if I remember it correctly, a bhikkhu came and told in a sermon that he has told 7 types of great thoughts a person can have. Great thoughts a person can have. Then the Buddha says, I endorse all that 7, but there is a missing one. That is the Nippapancha. That is the breaking the cycle of mental proliferation. So that is also very important. That is also great thinking. Nippapancha. So what we have to do is that we have to Nippapancha, right? We have to Nippapancha about the wrong concepts, about the prapancha or prapancha sanya sanka, developed with wrong notions, right? So that is why this is important. So this, it is a deliberate action once again, the Nippapancha, the breaking the cycle of mental proliferation, right? So in summarizing what we discuss here, right, before going to any further, right, the people, the SUD people, AUD people, and even people who have not started the alcohol or drug use yet, but they may have developed certain prapanchas, certain ideas, concepts, right, about alcohol and drugs. So in prevention, we have to erase that part. Even in treatment, that we have to erase it and replace it with the right things. So that process is called Nippapancha. So there are many tools introduced to engage in Nippapancha in Buddhist psychology. So mostly for the liberation to attain Nibbana. But here we are taking it in the mundane sense. The people have attachments. People have various dittis or the weaves, or people have ignorance about alcohol and other drugs. But how can we come out of that thinking process and have a right way of looking at substances? That is called the Nippapancha. The cognitive process in cyclical and could happen in forward and backward direction. The last step of the process is the manifestation of Prapancha Sanya Sanka from Prapancha. So we discussed that the Prapancha turns to Prapancha Sanya Sanka. Prapancha Sanya Sanka is translated as concepts characterized by the mind proliferation tendency. That is Bhikkhu Jnanananda's interpretation, the translation. Bhikkhu Bodhi says, perceptions and notions tinged by mental proliferation. Then the Pia Tang mentioned it as proliferation of conception and perception. So anyhow, the cognitive process is cyclical and could happen in forward and backward directions. The last step in the forward process, the last step, the process is the manifestation of Prapancha Sanya Sanka from Prapancha. Then this Prapancha Sanya Sanka has three words. What are the three words? Prapancha, Sanya, Sanka. This is providing value to the Prapancha or value over the recognition, Sanya, of the object. This creates an attachment, Tanha, conceit, Mana, and wrong view over the recognized object. That is what we say. So with the Tanna, Mana, Ditti. So we can say the Prapancha, you developed a Prapancha through a process of this Tanna, Mana, Ditti. The, Tanha, that is the attachment. Then the Mana, the conceit, and the Ditti, the view, the Prapancha Sanya occurs. Once you remove the Tannamana Ditti, it becomes Nippapancha. That is another way of looking at this. Then it becomes Nippapancha if you take out the Tannamana Ditti. And there are some other minor defilements mentioned here. Okay, right. So then what is that removing the Tannamana Ditti? That is actually understanding that nothing there to delight in, to welcome, to cling to, this in the end of. So this is the end of the latent tendencies of lust. So I will come to that. Nippapancha process is explained here, but little bit premature to discuss this at this stage, because now we are learning on how the concept is developed, how the concepts are developed. That is what we are discussing. So nothing there to be, so we have to get an understanding, nothing there to delight in alcohol or any other drug. Nothing there to welcome alcohol or drugs. Nothing there to cling to alcohol or drugs. This nothingness, right? This sunyata part of it is very important. Later on, we will come to understand the concept of sunyata. Even in Mahayana tradition, that this sunyata concept discusses, and even in the Theravada tradition, the sunyata concept is discussed at length. The anicca formation of that, the non-permanence. From that we comes to the sunyata. That is a different study, but we know that once the sutra further says a tool or a method of becoming Nippapancha, that's nothing there to delight in, understanding that there is nothing to delight in, to welcome, to cling to, so to this concept, to this thing, to alcohol. Then what happened? This ends of this come to an end of the latent tendency of lust, kamaraga to alcohol, latent tendency of aversion, the patiga, simply because that you are angry with your mother, you shouldn't have used alcohol or drugs. So that then the latent tendency of view, ditti, you have wrong view on this. Then latent tendency of doubt, vichikicha, you have doubts, you don't have, your self-efficacy is very low. You think once start, how can we stop? It is very difficult to stop, right? I am now hooked to these substances. I am innocent. I can't do anything. Likewise, the latent tendency of conceit, mana. So that is an area we haven't discussed yet. The mana, the conceit. the masculinity part of it, mainly. Simply because of a man that you have to drink. Simply because of simply because that you have to show that you are very strong, you have to use heroin in your team with your peers, right? The mana is there. So later on, we are discussing how the conceit is operational in the substance use. Then the latent tendency of desire for existence, and then the latent tendency of becoming an addict or bhavaraga, and the latent tendency of ignorance, avijja. So that can be removed. That can be removed. That can be removed through not welcoming the things. So that is how we should discuss this. Okay. The thinking process, vitakka, of developing a deluded image, papancha, of alcohol and drugs. From this point onwards, that we are going to take some practical experiences, practical examples, and see how this prapancha is developed, how this prapancha and the prapancha sanya sanka, the concepts developed, recognizing that alcohol use is pleasurable, alcohol use is very attractive, and so on. So that is what we are going to discuss in the next half of our discussion. Okay. Now I like to take the example of alcohol simply because, it is familiar to us. We have seen occasions that people are using alcohol in parties, festivities, individuals use alcohol, and even people who engage in drug treatment also maybe sometimes using alcohol, thinking that this is legal, but the drugs are illegal. But we know that alcohol is the number one drug misused in the world, right? So, but as it is familiar for us, let us take that example, then we can attribute the learnings to other substances also at the same time. So alcohol use is usually initiated and continued because of the view that it is fashionable, rewarding, and attractive, even if there is a price to pay. People know health consequences. People know sometimes that it is unpleasant, but yet, that they continue because they have a view, ditty, that it is fashionable. Oh, in a party, if I don't drink, it is not really, it is not fashionable, right? Then it is rewarding. Sometimes you gain added advantages with using alcohol, and for the person, it has become a very attractive event, attractive activity to use alcohol because of that craving, the attachment, tanha, bandhana, the bondage, upadana, right? That is grasping, those things, right? This notion holds that alcohol consumption, like many other acquired human behaviors, is a learned behavior, usually performed in the social context. So we know that alcohol use happens in a social context. There are many socially acceptable reasons and occasions for alcohol use. Various social rewards for the use of alcohol, as well as famous personalities or role models that engage in drinking behaviors, then the result in the wide variety of alcohol-related practices being integrated into day-to-day life, like parties. Now, when you are planning a party, definitely the mind goes to bringing alcohol for that. So, likewise, it is very common. Drinking alcohol typically has a social function involving two or more persons interacting with one another and reacting to some social stimulus, right? Alcohol, then we have to look into on what kind of circumstances that mostly individuals use alcohol. Alcohol is usually consumed at events such as parties, festivals, celebrations, sometimes with young people, once their examinations are over, on holidays, and all of which share certain standard features, like such as spirit of happiness and cheer is there. Anyway, that occasion is a happy occasion. Then there is a friendly gathering. Okay, then there is a friendly gathering. We can see how the substance become. We know that the alcohol or drug effect. We can see that alcohol or drug effect is neutral or unpleasant. It is unpleasant, but people perceive the total experience as overall positive and attractive. How does this happen? The proliferation taking place in which way? Mainly, we can summarize it in various ways, but we are going to discuss it in detail. The symbolic meaning attached to alcohol, right? Now, the moment that you take the glass of alcohol, the message comes, now you are relaxing. It has become a symbol of relaxation, a symbol of adulthood, symbol of pleasure. The moment the bottle brings there, right? The atmosphere is changed, right? People, individuals start talking loudly when the alcohol bottles were just brought into the scene, right? Then the rituals, sometimes the way the bottle is open, how they pour it, then toasting it, cheers. So there are many rituals around this substance use, especially alcohol. Then sanctions to break rules. After using alcohol, sometimes you can break certain social rules because other people also just pardoning and sanctioning the alcohol-induced misbehavior, right? If you want to say a bad joke to a friend with a glass of alcohol, you can tell that you may not do it when you are sober. That person also, right, pardon that behavior, saying, oh, he is under the influence of alcohol, right? So that sanction to break rule, it gives a opportunity for someone to, break rules, and that doesn't blame your image. That does not tarnish your image also, right? So you can say next day, it was not me, it was alcohol. So the whole blame comes to alcohol, and I am an innocent person. That is because of the sanction to break the rule. And then the social beliefs, we discussed in our previous presentations also. It is helpful for forget problems. It helps to ease tiredness. It gives pleasure. For creativity, you must use cannabis. Likewise, there are many social beliefs. Then you become a member of a group. So that is very important, the membership. Then the expectations, as we discussed earlier in our previous episode. Then the images from advertising, the alcohol industry also advertise alcohol and tobacco in a way that very sophisticated, fashionable, and the social ambience, the social ambience, very relaxed atmosphere. In such a situation, that individuals use alcohol and they attribute that environment, relaxation, the pleasure to the alcohol bottle. So that is what has happened. So although the subjective feeling is alcohol or drugs, what you really feel is unpleasant due to some other factors, external factors and internal factors, because of your concepts developed through prapancha. And we are going to learn how these prapanchas and the prapancha sanya sanka is developed at the latter part of this presentation. The total experience become overall positive and attractive. So we have to break this part. So once we remove the highly rewarding part, what will happen? Now look at this equation. The reality is alcohol or drugs effect is unpleasant, but the other influences actually make it little bit make it overall positive, right? Now let us look into that, and the attribution of the increased feeling of joy and goodwill to alcohol at these events. The events could be explained through the two learning processes. We know that basic learning processes and classical conditioning and operant conditioning. On one side, the conditioning, and through the social learning. Now here it is important to bring the knowledge of Bandura's social learning theories also, Right. Conditioned response are a significant part of learning that take place. However, behavior cannot be explained solely through the conditioned response alone, as humans can think, plan, believe, expect, and anticipate. Individuals are by no means passive respondents to stimuli, but conditioning and thoughts represent different levels of learning and reciprocally influence each other. The conditioned response can be made and unmade by thoughts, while conditioning can influence thought. Humans can unlearn what they have learned using their cognitive ability, so that the strength of the conditioned response can be changed over time. So we know that although through conditioning, right, very soon that we are going to see that in happy occasions they use alcohol. Happy occasions they use alcohol. After but the happiness is attributed to substances, but you can unlearn that because you have your cognitive abilities to unlearn what you have wrongly learned. So that is a part of the treatment and prevention. What is noteworthy is that alcohol is usually consumed in occasions that are already characterized by happiness and a sense of freedom. In such settings, it is easy to assume that the presence of alcohol is the cause of the feeling of joy or relaxation experienced on these occasions. In reality, however, if alcohol is used on such occasions over a long period of time, with the belief that it is the cause of enjoyment, the users begin to associate the feeling of pleasure with alcohol use gradually. Alcohol then acquires an aura of being fun-filled and pleasurable through repeatedly pairing it with positive emotions, a process known as classical conditioning. Through this, alcohol becomes a symbol or sanya of pleasure, and this is a perceptual distortion. So that is a perceptual distortion, sanya vipallasa. In the second episode, we discussed about this vipallasa. So this is sanya vipallasa. Let us look into little bit in detail about this classical conditioning. We do not see things as they really are most of the time. Our understanding of objects is distorted and covered with a mist due to ignorance. It is covered with mist. We don't see the reality. Why? Because of the ignorance, the moha. We discussed in the first episode, the moha. So does the general notion people hold that alcohol and drug use is pleasurable, beneficial, and significant, which is a conditioned phenomenon on one side. Buddhism very deeply discussed the interrelationship of causality and conditioning. So we call it in Buddhist psychology the idappacheta. Idappacheta. Idappacheta is the Buddhist term translating specific conditionality. So in Patthana Prakarana, we learn with 24 causalities this idappacheta, specific conditionality, or this, that conditionality. It refers to the principle of causality, that all things arise and exist due to specific cause or condition and cease once the cause or the condition are removed. This principle could be applied to the cessation of alcohol and drug use as well. Therefore, it is essential to understand how dull chemicals such as alcohol, ethanol, the tetrahydrocannabinol, the cannabis, or diacetyl morphine, the heroin, acquire beneficial properties which are quite the opposite of their pharmacological properties through this conditioning and other forms of learning, social learning. You know, this classical conditioning, also known as Pavlovian condition or respond conditioning, it was most basic type of learning to be discovered and studied within the behaviorist tradition. And it refers to the behavioral technique of pairing. So pairing, a natural occurring response to a particular stimulus with another stimulus. It is expected that after repeated pairing of the two stimuli, the response to the first stimulus would be shown when exposed to the second. The primary theorist in this study of classical condition was Ivan Pavlov, a Russian scientist trained in biology and medicine, who discovered the learning process somewhat accidentally while studying the digestive system of the dog. You know that experiment, the Pavlovian experiment. In other words, classical conditioning involves the repeated pairing of a stimulus that produce a natural response in an individual with an unrelated stimulus that does not naturally produce the response to the first. This eventually leads to the individual learning to connect the two stimuli, finally showing the natural response to the former when exposed to the latter. Classical condition can be called a form of learning by association. Now, let us take this in this diagram, discuss, what happened in this Pavlovian experiment, right? When the meat powder is produced, when the dog sees food, naturally they start salivating. What will happen when a bell is rung, or the sound of a tone? That is the orienting response. There is no any other response. Not definitely the salivation. But what the Pavlov did, he rang the bell and produced the meat powder. Rang the bell, gave the food. Rang the bell, gave the food. Rang the bell, gave the food. That is the pairing part. So he rang the bell while giving food for these dogs. So after conditioning, what happened? Just ringing the bell evoke salivation. So earlier it was not, no. Now if you call a dog and ring a bell to that dog, do you think that dog salivate? No. But the learned dogs of Pavlov actually salivated. So what is that? That is called classical conditioning. As discussed above, classical conditioning was first studied by the Pavlov celebrated experiment conducted in 1927. This experiment was done in 1927, in which he observed the natural reaction of salivation in dogs. They saw when the food is offered, the dogs start salivation. Then the Pavlov experiment involved examining the natural process of salivation, unconditioned response. So that is, we call the unconditioned response in dogs when presenting with food. So that is the unconditioned stimulus. They naturally salivate. And when paired with the sound of a bell, non-stimulus. Sounding of a bell a few seconds before the meat powder was given to the dogs, over time, the dogs began to salivate at the sound of the bell. So that is the conditioned response and the conditioned stimulus, even when food was not given. This process briefly shown in the diagram. Once again, you can see the meat powder, just salivation, that's a very natural thing. Unconditioned stimulus response. So the unconditioned stimulus leads to unconditioned response, that is natural. Then the tone, right, the non-stimulus, that orienting response. Then the tone and meat powder paired several times, they evoke salivation, that is once again unconditioned response. But later on, when even without the meat powder, when the bell is rung, they started salivation. That is called the conditioned response. Can you think that you can apply this to alcohol usage? Well, we know, if you look at very carefully, the before conditioning, the happy occasions, we have seen people use alcohol when they are happy, with a nice gathering, on a festive day, right? On celebration, on birthdays, all characterized with happy and elated feelings, right? Then happy occasions, the mood, it is pleasurable. You feel pleasure. That is a response. And if anyone gives alcohol without saying it is alcohol, right? So it is neutral or unpleasant. The real experience of alcohol is unpleasant, right? Unbiased response to alcohol, that anyone say the head is rotating, like that is unpleasant. But what happened? In a happy occasion, if he continues using alcohol several times, pairing, we know this happy occasion always evoke happiness, the pleasure. And after some conditioning, what happened? Just alcohol gives pleasure. That is actually a conditioned response. The alcohol becomes the symbol of pleasure. So through classical conditioning, alcohol can become a symbol or sanya of pleasure. That is how sanya. So this is the sanya vipallasa, the perversion of the perception, right? The symbol of pleasure and happiness. Even though in reality, the chemical effect of the alcohol, heroin, or many other drugs are unpleasant, and the experience of using those things are really uninteresting. So this is very basic way of how distorted perception, sanya vipallasa or viparita sanya, distorted perception, are developed over alcohol and drugs. So people then, with this conditioning process, they tend to think that alcohol use is pleasurable, alcohol produce pleasurable. That is why when even the unopened bottle is present, people become happy and elated because they get that sanya, the signal, the wrong notion, the wrong perception. When in a social context, individuals learn to rely on alcohol to relax and enjoy, or as a performance enhancer, following a repeated association of alcohol with the mood they strive to achieve in the given context. With the time, alcohol gradually becomes a necessary condition for reaching the desired mood. After some time, what will happen? In a party where the alcohol is not present, you feel bad. Now the operant condition is coming. Now, earlier you enjoyed these parties without alcohol because you were not trapped to alcohol. You didn't develop that sanya. Okay, you didn't develop that the conditioned state. But later, what happened? After several occasions, what happened? When a party, when an occasion where there is no alcohol, you become uncomfortable, and that party may not be very happy and nice party. So let us examine the conditioned process of heroin, cannabis, or other drugs. The first instance of the cannabis or heroin use, as well as the other instances that they follow, usually take place in pleasurable locations and is based on various expectations. Examples of such occasions. Let us take on what kind of occasions that people start using cannabis, start using heroin, start using substances. At a place where friends gather for casual conversation. So there is sense of freedom in that place. At a concert given by a favorite band. So the favorite band is singing and you are using cannabis. Okay. But think about the environment. During a trip with friends, right? On an occasion when one is free from the supervision of adult and experience much freedom and independence. When you hang out with your friends, there is no supervision. You are young, so that's a very relaxed environment, and you are using cannabis, right? In a happy and pleasurable and occasion. At the end of the day's work, when one wishes to relax. So your hard day work is over, and now you are anyhow relaxing, but at that time you start using substances. On occasions, one experiences a thrill about doing something against the law. Sometimes you break the law and you have the thrill, that peril is the law, the danger is the kick. So in such a situation, sometimes you see the occasions such as these are in themselves pleasant, exciting, and enjoyable. However, those who use heroin and drugs on such occasions perceive the enjoyment as derived from the use of cannabis or heroin and not from the occasion. So they just show their blind eye over the occasion, and they think the pleasure, the relaxation, and everything came from the substances. That is how they develop this vipallasa, sanya vipallasa, chitta vipallasa, ditti vipallasa. And it happens with developing a concept. It happens with developing a papancha. Now the papancha is developing, and it turns to papancha sanya sanka. It goes back now once again to influence the other perceptions that they are getting, the sanya that they are getting. The repeated pairing of happiness brought about by pleasurable occasion with the use of heroin or drugs gradually leads to the user to feel that heroin, cannabis, or any drug cause the feeling of joy experience on enjoyable occasions. Eventually, heroin alone would be sufficient to evoke the same sense of joy. Now they got trapped to the heroin. They think that heroin gives us joy. The concept is developed, the experience is developed, learning is done, conditioning process. In this way, users become conditioned to respond to heroin or drugs by feeling happy through the learning process known as classical conditioning. So, conditioning plays a vital role in human behavior. We know. For instance, while the aroma of newly baked bread, right, stimulus directly connected to food, is likely to cause hunger in most individuals. Stimuli not directly related to a specific activity may evoke the relevant response too. For example, sexual arousal is conditioned by a variety of stimuli other than those direct involved in sex, such as the sight of the hand or leg. A clock indicated the nearing time one drinks tea or coffee can produce a thirst for those beverages. All that is learned phenomena, right? How we learn. So try to apply this to alcohol and drug using situation and see that. Now you are hearing and you have to reflect on this and try to understand that. That reflect the knowledge that you get through reflection is the most important thing here, right? The symbolic association of particular image or object with certain situation color the individual's subjective perception of the world. Symbols are the sanya, the symbols are valuable tools for evoking desirable emotions and moods. For example, the presence of a Christmas tree dramatically contributes to the creating of festive mood, right? Now, for example, now suppose on December 24th, you couldn't find the Christmas tree and there is no Christmas tree in your house, that you feel differently. There is no Christmas mood. But suppose at 12 midnight even, someone brings or you decorate the Christmas tree, all of a sudden the Christmas mood evokes. But we can't explain it through the botany of the pine tree, right? That is symbolic meaning given to that, right? This phenomenon cannot be explained by analyzing the botanical characteristics of a pine tree alone. Similarly, colored piece of fabric can influence the people's mood, evoking feelings of patriotism and national pride if those pieces of cloth are national flags, especially if they are hoisted on occasions that evoke feelings of patriotism and national pride. Okay, the national flag, if you ask to put it on the floor and ask you to walk, can you do that? No. Why? Because it has acquired a symbolic meaning. Now, maybe it is just a piece of cloth, right? But when it happens to be the national flag, it acquires a different thing through conditioning, through learning, through cognitive process. It has acquired a different meaning. Symbols are not consistently recognized as symbols. While it is well known that the festive feeling brought about by the presence of a Christmas tree are by no means the result of inherent properties of the pine tree, the symbolic function of alcohol and other drugs is not generally recognized in the same manner. But we know that it is not the Christmas tree that brings the Christmas feeling. We have that understanding. But unfortunately, in a party, in a festive mood, the alcohol, we can't have that understanding unless we have a penetrative insight on this, right? Because we are so used to, right, experience that. In other words, it is unlikely that these substances, feeling of pleasure and goodwill believed to be evoked, would not be considered in isolation from their chemical properties. When individuals look at their alcohol and drug use mindfully, with sati sampajanya, later on we are discussing, employing lucid awareness and bare attention, with a clear comprehension, sampajanya, with the wisdom, panya, arise on the actual or factual nature of the alcohol and drug use. Then only it arises the real nature, actual nature, that awareness, that awakening about alcohol. That is extremely important. We can break that conditioning and look at the reality of the substances. In many symbolic effects of alcohol comes into effect at this very sight, smell and taste even before it is consumed. For example, two friends in act of having a good time with glass of beer do not wait for the alcohol to be absorbed into their bodies and reach their brain to experience feeling of happiness, goodwill and comradeship. Their mood peaks at the very first sip of the beer or even at the mere sight of the unopened bottles. Thus, the perceived feeling of happiness, coziness, goodwill, and comradeship thought about by a glass of alcohol are experienced because the glass of alcohol has come to be the symbolic of the feeling and not because of it has any inherent property that could create these feelings. So we have to understand that. We have to experience that. Please reflect on this and see. So the proliferation take place through the operant conditioning also. As discussed about, users who repeatedly take alcohol, heroin, or any other drug on pleasurable occasion eventually come to see those substances as the main element that create happiness and the sense of festivity. As a result, such substances become a symbol of positive emotion, particularly those experienced at special events. Eventually, to users who become accustomed to the only experiencing feeling of joy and festivity with the use of alcohol, heroin, or any other drug, any special event or celebration would cease to be joyous and festive without drugs. In other words, pleasure occasions would become cheerless to users who see alcohol or heroin as necessary to create the feeling of cheer. This acceptance of drugs eventually make it easier for its user to extend to other aspects of their day-to-day lives so that they would eventually need alcohol and drugs to complete even the most mundane tasks. So after some time, what happened? To do everything, you need alcohol. Now you have developed the AUD problem, as alcohol use disorder. So for others, for SUD also the same. In this way, users form a solid mental bond with alcohol, cannabis or heroin or any other drug, and their habit of using them become the regular part of their day-to-day event. Alcohol or drug use, which was once limited to only a few days, for instance, weekends, would then become a daily activity. In a situation in which alcohol or drugs are not available, users would experience the same uh, severe discomfort that a person who is forced to abandon a long held habit would, even if it is for a short time. The use of alcohol, methamphetamine, heroin, or other substances after a period of non use would then immediately eliminate this feeling of discomfort. Hence, the function of drug as a reinforcer, a substance perceived as something that could eliminate discomfort or bring about a positive outcome. Hope you understand. Now the operant learning is conditioning. Now, as they created a bond, now situations that alcohol is not present, the substance are not present, they feel that moment really unpleasant, not very pleasurable. Then they use it. They use alcohol, and that evokes the pleasure. So later on, they learn, right? This is operant conditioning. To be pleasurable, to have pleasure, you need alcohol to be pleasure. So then they directly use alcohol to get the pleasurable feeling. Oh, that is a kind of operant conditioning. So how we can see how the classical conditioning and operant conditioning work together to make him, to make him dependent on substances. Alcohol or drug users eventually learn to perceive ordinary situations without the use of drugs as uncomfortable, and that it is necessary to use drugs to ease the feeling of unease and discomfort. By repeatedly using alcohol and drugs to feel comfortable, the idea of alcohol, tobacco, heroin, or any other drug being a drug that brings relief becomes reinforced in the mind of the user. In this way, through the process of operant conditioning, alcohol or drugs users wrongly learn that substance is an essential part of their living. So, this way, through classical conditioning and operant conditioning, people learn that alcohol use is pleasurable. So this is how the prapanchization or the proliferation take place. How the sanya vipallasa take place. How the chitta vipallasa, the perversion of mind take place. How the ditti vipallasa creates, right? So once you understand these things, only that you can design a treatment plan for a substance user to erase or unlearn what they have wrongly learned through conditioning. But in the next presentation, we will discuss the process of social learning, how social learning creates this. Still, we are in the second chapter of the book, but I know the beginning we focus on the biochemistry of the substance, and we found out that alcohol is a depressant, heroin and cannabis, they are depressants. But after using substances, the people become happy and elated, quite opposite to the pharmacological properties of that substance. And we observe how this happens through classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Of course, the social learning part we are discussing in the next episode. So we focus our attention on the Madhupindika Sutra and relevant sutras discussing the process of prapancha, developing the prapancha, and how to do nipapancha. So nipapancha part, erasing, unlearning part, okay, is also a very important tool, and Buddhist psychology provides various methodologies to uncondition, to unlearn what they have wrongly learned, to remove the craving, to remove the attachment from the substances. So that is very important in the treatment process. I know today was a heavy day. This episode is not easy because we discuss a very deep Buddhist concept explained in Madhupindika Sutta, and we went to learn about some psychological theories also, classical conditioning and operant conditioning, how it links to this prapancha process, right? Developing concept on substances. So all this is still that we are discussing the etiology part of why people use drugs, what is the main cause for substance use. It is not the simple availability, but it is not only that people have these risk factors, but the attachment, the craving that they have developed towards the substance. So unless and until that we remove that craving part from substance, the attachment part from that substance, the recovery process is incomplete. And in our prevention, if you don't utilize this, if you don't challenge the developed concept, wrongly developed concept on alcohol and drugs, that it is very attractive, positive, right? Even we engage them in, we provide them a conducive environment, right? Very positive environment, protect with protective factors. That is why I raised the question, how protective the protective factors are, unless and until that we challenge and erase what the created demand in their mindset. So thank you very much once again for listening to this episode. Not very easy, but I will help to understand the book Mind Liberated from Alcohol and Drugs, the Buddhist Psychology Manual of Prevention and Treatment, page by page, paragraph by paragraph. So you will get an idea about this. Probably, I think it will go up to, as it is now, 25 to 30 episodes. Hope you have the patience and courage to go through all this. And okay, once again, thanking you I wish you all best of luck. Thank you.